a big speech yesterday as well by the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. She warned that the country, the world, is facing a hurricane of migrants. Speaking at the Conservative conference, the Home Secretary accused Tory colleagues of being too squeamish about being branded racist when it comes to tackling migrant numbers, while claiming that a Labour government would simply open the borders. Well, Suella Braverman's comments have divided the party, with Conservative London Assembly Chair Andrew Boff even being escorted from the audience for heckling criticism during her speech, but by all accounts was allowed back in today. Well, joining me now is asylum lawyer David Haigh. And good afternoon to you, David.
Hi, good afternoon to you.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. The migrant issue won't go away. A lot of the focus has been on HS2 by, at conference, and particularly by what Rishi Sunak just had to say in his speech in the last hour or so. But it was Suella Braverman's speech yesterday that really, set everyone talking, as the Home Secretary, reiterating a lot of the points she made in her speech in Washington last week. There's been a lot of fallout about this. Some people even comparing her words to Enoch Powell. What did you make of what she had to say?
I think in terms of the actual speech, rather than the content, which I'll come on to in a minute, in terms of the speech, I mean, it's almost an Oscar-worthy performance in terms of, appealing to a certain part of the Tory party and electioneering. That was, even when I watched it, I thought that it was a considerable improvement on her public speaking style. So that was good. But then when you come to the content, there was a lot of extreme rhetoric. But then that goes in, with, again, it's an electioneering speech. But there was very little action, very little real proposal. So you've got a lot of the usual immigration headlines, but there's no real hard lines and no action. And that's the issue here. These, migration and asylum and illegal migration is a global problem, and we need a solution. And there's a lot of talk in here from a government that's been in power for 13 years, but still hasn't fixed the problem.
No, I mean, haven't fixed a problem a lot of people perceive in legal migration, let alone illegal. Let me read you some of the quotes from Suella Braverman's speech, especially for people at home who frankly have better things to do than watch and listen to the Conservative Party conference all day. They've got jobs to do. She said a hurricane of migrants is coming. She warned that global migration is a hurricane, threats to hit Britain with millions of new arrivals. So she delivered a tub-thumping Tory conference speech, it says. And she basically said that the wind of change that carried my own parents across the globe in the 20th century was a mere gust compared to the hurricane that is coming. And as I said, also accused politicians of being squeamish about being smeared as racist. The reality is, everyone really accepts that this is an issue. Voters of all political persuasions are concerned about this issue. It has a massive economic impact, it has a massive social impact on our communities as well. If we're not allowed to talk openly about it without everyone shouting bigot, xenophobe, racist, or Enoch Powell, wannabe, how do we come up with a solution? What would you suggest?
I mean, I do think her language was, unnecessarily extreme in the sense.
What's extreme about what she said?
Well, unnecessarily extreme in terms of finding a solution, but she's done that for a reason of
what was extreme?
I think, phrases like a hurricane,
What's
I'm not saying
about that. She was making a comparison between the small levels of migrants moving across the world in, 30, 40 years ago with the huge numbers that are moving right now. That's a reasonable comparison, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not saying that it's something that I said in terms of the fact that she used the word extreme. I can understand why people that she used the word hurricane. I understand why they would say that was extreme. But I don't think that's the actual issue here. That everyone, I think, or majority of people accept that this is a problem. It needs a solution. And it's a shame that there were no actual solutions and real action proposed in that speech. And like I said, it's an electioneering one. We've got next week the Supreme Court will be looking into the appeal by the Home Secretary in terms of the Rwanda policy. We'll expect a decision on that perhaps in November. And if that goes the way of the government, then the matter's going to get stuck in the ECHR. There was no reference of the ECHR in Suella's speech and how that will be dealt with. If it doesn't go the way of the government, you've got a serious problem in terms of credibility of the government in that area.
Well, yeah, now, would it be a question of credibility of the government? Because I think most voters would say, anyone, and there are many Labour voters who are just as concerned about this as Conservative voters, I think they would simply say, there we go again, lefty lawyers, lefty judges, making decisions, unaccountable, unelected, making decisions, throwing out the decision of an elected government, a parliament that has voted for this policy.
But these would be if the Supreme Court rules against the government. These are our judges, and this is
You say our judges. I didn't have a say in electing them.
Well, they're not elected. They're selected.
Exactly. Who are they accountable to?
Well,
look, judges are supposed, in this country, judges and courts are supposed to enforce the law in terms of applying the law that has actually been made by our elected representatives. They're not, the law has been made by our elected representatives. It's been voted through by a majority government.
Yeah, correct.
So what business is it of the courts to strike it down? That's what I think most voters are going to think.
But it's, I understand that, but it's the way that we have the rule of law in this country in terms of it's the judges that interpret the law that's set down by the executive and Parliament, and that's what they're doing. Now, obviously there's a larger argument when it comes to foreign judges in the ECHR, but if our Supreme Court, whose judges have been selected in the way that they have been for generations, fined against the government on their interpretation of the law, then if we're saying that we don't like the fact that judges here can interpret, whether it's a government that is in the court case or whether it's a person or a company, if we're saying that we don't want judges to interpret our own law, then we need to open the concept of rule of law in its entirety. That's the issue.
I think we probably do. Look, David Haigh, I wish we could talk for you with longer. I'm sure we will on another occasion. Really appreciate you joining us. That is Asylum lawyer David Haigh.